I recently sat down with my grandmother and interviewed her on our family's immigration story. The story follows my great-great-grandparents, Susanna and Andrew Mihalsky, on their journey in 1904 from Czechoslovakia to Whiting, a southeast suburb of Chicago in Indiana. Our first chapter of the story begins with their lives in Czechoslovakia in the late 1800s.
My grandmother and grandpa came to America in 1904. They were both born in 1880, and my grandfather was in the army of Franz Joseph of Hungary.
Franz Joseph I was the Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary, Croatia, and Bohemia, and monarch of other Austro-Hungarian states.
After he got out, he met my grandmother, and they got married.
What did she do?
She lived in a very small village, and she one day she left because her mother had died, and her father had remarried, and the new wife brought all her sisters to live with them. So they had.
Oh, right, and she didn't
she didn't like that idea. She felt she was being taken advantage of because it was her house, her mother and her father's. But now this other woman is jumping in there, taking all her what she felt that her mother had left her, not in ways of money or anything like that, but just basically quilts and blankets and crocheted stuff, because they were very, very talented in that line, and maybe they had a lot of time on their hands, so they were able to do this and probably sell them to the people in the big cities that liked all that type stuff.
Yeah. So where was the village that she grew up in?
Probably maybe 15, 20 miles away from the big city of Prešov.
Okay.
And that's where she ended up. And she ended up taking care of a doctor's kids.
In Prešov?
In Prešov. Doctor's kids, or was maybe he was a lawyer. I got the impression it might have been a lawyer situation. And then in the meantime, she met my grandpa that had come out of the war that they were in, from the Franz Joseph. They liked to dance, and I guess they had a lot of dances and stuff like that. And they were the impression that they had met, really, when it came down to it.
So her name was
Susan with a Z. Susanna.
Yeah. Mihalsky?
That's her married name.
Okay, and then your grandfather's name?
Andrew Mihalsky.
Okay.
Okay, and she had a couple sisters also, and eventually one came to America, into Whiting.
Our second chapter of this story follows Andrew and Susanna's transportation from Prešov to New York City. They came right after the American Depression of the 1890s, where immigration jumped from a low of 3.5 million in that decade to a high of 9 million in the first decade of the new century. By 1910, Eastern and Southern Europeans made up 70% of the immigrants entering the country. Right now we're in Prešov, and do you know anything about why they decided to come to America and leave?
My grandmother was told that the only job that he could get, because of his lack of skills, that he would become a policeman, and in her mind, a policeman was a dog catcher, and she thought that was very degrading for her husband to have that type of job.
And you say skills, you mean he didn't really have any education because he was in the war, and
Yeah, other than with a gun and stuff like that, he did not He not a carpenter or a tradesman, or how to feed cattle, to become a farmer, to plant food. And he knew a lot of songs from what a lot of, how do I put it?
Like traditional songs?
Traditional songs, and then a lot of, like drinking songs, with the beer and everything like
cool.
that. Would enjoy just the camaraderie, because he was for so long in the service, seeing the same guys year after year, and fighting all the time and everything like this. Is that he enjoyed just being out.
Okay, so now we've covered why they decided to come, which is with the police officer.
Yeah.
And then, like, what was their journey?
Okay. They were on they had to go to Germany to get a ship. They got married in 1903, and they got and then the following spring, March of 1904, and I'm sure there wasn't that many ships leaving.
My grandmother and I did a little research on the steamship Susan and Andrew came on. It was called the Norddeutscher Lloyd Bremen and was owned by a German shipping company. It was founded in 1857 and carried about 93 passengers. The crossings took roughly 14 days.
While she was on the boat, she got very sick from just the seasickness and everything like that, and she was so appreciative that one of the crew members gave her some pickled herring or something like this to eat, and she was fine the rest of the trip. I don't think she enjoyed the trip, but I think there was probably so many different nationalities, different types of groups and everything like that. And then there's different dialects and everything like this, so everybody is a little bit different, but I think they somehow got the message across with what they're trying to say, or they would go to someone that, can you explain to so and so, this is what I'm looking for, or whatever.
So then once they got to New York, they would have gone through Ellis Island, right?
Yes, yeah. And then they eventually got to the Whiting area, and they all got jobs at Standard Oil, and they were hiring, obviously, individuals that were strong people, and he worked in a barrel factory, filling barrels, filling oil. Yeah, and that time women just never worked, so they rented a home from Standard Oil. Had some homes that they had, and there was a two-room house. Or probably maybe part of a house, not very, very clear. They stayed there for till they got enough money together, and then they built a house of 4 rooms on West Fred Street.
Yeah. So tell me about, like, the children that your grandparents had. So that would be like your aunts and uncles.
Well, it was just
like, how many kids?
My grandmother had 5 children. She had a boy that died early on. Had twins that one died on the 22nd or 23rd of December, and my grandfather had to go through the whole burial situation on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
To bury the other.
So she lost 2.
3, the 2 twins, and
she lost both of the twins.
Both of the twins, yeah. One lived for a little bit for 2 months, and the other one died on Christmas. 2 days before Christmas, and buried on Christmas Eve. First one was Sister Joseph, and Mom was the last.
For those who have never heard of Whiting, Indiana, here is my grandmother's description of it. Not only is it where my ancestors immigrated to, it's also where both of my grandparents grew up and met in high school. Although I do not visit Whiting frequently, I can still see the mills across Lake Michigan from my bedroom window.
across the state line, right along Lake Michigan. Chicago is on Lake Michigan, and if you keep going a little east and south, Whiting is the next community that you would come to, crossing the Illinois state line. And it was noted for years ago. It was a big meat packing for Chicago, and then also Standard Oil for the oil, and they thrived with that for years and years. It was very, very important for Chicago to have these things.
Okay, so then you obviously grew up in Whiting.
Yes, yeah.
With your parents.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was a very small, very, very orientated to nationalities. They would live together in clusters on blocks, and you go up and down the street, and so many of them were all of the same nationality.
Okay.
Same churches, same religions.
Wow.
It was a very clannish, so to speak. And sometimes they didn't like each other because of what they were. Could be the nicest people and everything like that, but because they were Polish or they were Hungarian or Croatian or something like this, or they went to the wrong church, that too could be, in their minds type thing. And of course, if they were Catholic, well, that's another story entirely. I mean, that's like they were the devil or something.
Really?
Not to that extent, but just that.
It was just a stigma.
A stigma that they had, no matter how they were, which was really sad for sure.
So then was Whiting, like, it seems like it was a sort of hot spot for immigrants to come and settle from Europe.
Yeah, but they were very hard workers.
All blue collar. Right?
Yeah, the majority, yes, yeah.
What do you think drew people to Whiting from Europe? Or obviously they just wanted to come to America, but when they got to America,
well, they knew they were limited with what they could do, because first of all they couldn't speak the language, and they had to have someone that, like an interpreter basically, to do that, and they had to find jobs that there was not a lot of direction to, type thing. And loading and moving barrels of oil, that sure would be something simple for them to do. And they worked very, very hard through the days, and they the only day off they work was a Sunday. They worked Saturdays too, if the need was there.
Is the house still there?
Yeah, and that's the house that your mom was so nice to drop me off, and the guy sitting on the porch I walked up to. Did she tell you that?
No. When was that?
Last year about this time. We were there, and I told her, I says, well, we're here. I says, I'll show you where my grandmother and where I lived till I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
So that's what it was.
Did you go in? Did the guy let you go in? Or?
Yeah. I mean.
You walked around.
And when we went, and I said we have to go, and we found out that it was a one-way street that it never was before.
Huh.
Here, this gentleman was sitting on my grandmother's his porch.
Now.
Yeah, it's my grandmother's front porch. Your mom said, well, go over there and talk to him. We did, and I explained to him, I said, this used to be my grandmother's house. And he said, oh, yeah? Well, he says, it's mine now. And I thought, oh, boy, this guy's going to got an attitude already. I'm in trouble. And then he says, would you like to see in the house? And I'm thinking, huh? Do I want to go in the house, number one? Do I trust this guy, number two? I said, I'd love to. And
so his father bought the house
from my aunt.
That concludes my family's immigration story. I have never visited the house, but I hope to soon. I think it's important for everyone to know where they came from and the story behind it. Thanks for listening.